Robert Plank Show, episode 289, Marketing Multipliers, Masterminds, Direct Mail, Membership Sites, Copywriting, Freelancing, Newsletters, and Networking with Kevin Donlin. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the program. Our guest today is Kevin Donlin, and Kevin has been involved in marketing since 1994 when he sold one of the first ebooks online, payable by check, and you had to mail it to a post office box. Kevin's been the webmaster for FedEx.com. Google sent him a refrigerator by mail as a thank you gift for being so big with AdWords. He's been interviewed by ABC TV in Detroit, Fox, NBC News, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. He's the author and co-author of 5 books, including Marketing Multipliers, and Kevin is joining us today to share some of his latest tips and tactics to grow your business. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey Robert, terrific to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited that you're here. So can you kind of tell us, we kind of went over some cool stuff in your bio, but what are you up to these days and what kind of makes you stand out?
Yeah, that was a whirlwind introduction. I thanks for doing that. My head's spinning at all the stuff that you covered there. These days, I have 2 main business focuses. One is copywriting. I write a lot of online and offline promotions for clients. Typically, they're $2 to $20 million businesses. Those projects are typically 4, 5, 6 figures, and that's a service. My other business is called Marketing Multipliers, and that consists of, it's a monthly subscription box, and that's where I deliver tools to people who may not be able to afford my expensive services. And so my tools, we can chat about those today if you like, but basically what I've tried to do over the past 2-3 years is come up with tools to deliver similar results to my skills. So it takes a lot of time to learn how to, juggle, for example. Even more appropriate would be how to start a fire with rubbing sticks together. That could take you an hour. It's easier to rub, to strike a match. So what I'm trying to do for people is give them a book of matches, in essence, if they want to start a fire in their marketing rather than hire me to rub sticks together for them. So basically I'm doing copywriting and also my monthly subscription service.
Awesome, and there's lots of cool stuff to talk about there, and I love that whole idea of, you have a skill, you know all this marketing stuff, but there's a whole bunch of people that either, can't afford you, or maybe there's only 24 hours in a day, you only have time for so many clients, and maybe some people just kind of want to get a little piece of you or do it on their own, so lots of cool stuff there. And just to kind of get everyone caught up, because I always feel like I have to do this whenever we talk about copywriting, because there's always like some people who think that copywriting is like you draw a C and you put a circle around it and stuff like
Exactly.
that. And so so can you kind of tell us what copywriting is for you, and when someone hires you for copywriting, what do they get? Are we talking direct mail pieces or web pages or a mixture or other things, or what's copywriting for you?
Sure, good question. Well, copywriting is like playing the guitar. It's easy to learn. It takes a lifetime to master. I've been doing it in one form or another since 1994, and I only feel I'm now just getting good at it. It's not meaning I shortchanged all my clients for 20 years, but I'm just really getting to the point where I'm getting it's just like the guitar. It's very difficult to master this thing. There are a lot of moving parts with copywriting. At its core, it's salesmanship multiplied. So if you've got a good message on the phone or in person, what I do is come in and get it on paper, and we put it in the mail. We turn it into a webinar script. We do a web page. We do email promotion. So basically, I'm finding people who are doing things well, and I'm multiplying them by taking their words, mixing in my big ideas, and giving them more ways to reach a bigger audience. That's how I work as a copywriter. And I do, as I said, email, webinar scripts, web page copy, landing pages, and then direct mail, postcards, letters, sequences, and also print ads. I'm getting really good results and have for years with full page ads in the local magazine. So that's how copywriting works for me. And we could talk for about 10 sessions, 20 minutes each about the topic. But it is funny, people. So with my marketing multipliers club, which we could talk about, I suppose. But one of the things I do for people is I do a critique for them. So I can come in and look at a sales letter just as another set of expert eyes. And I was just doing this before we got on our conversation today. I'm giving one of my members about a half dozen different headlines to test throughout his webpage, and it's going to dramatically increase the response. I can just tell you this because there were some big problems with what he sent me. But in 5 minutes, I can tweak the thing. It's like the plumber that you hire to come in, and he takes his hammer and bangs on something, tapes it up, takes him 5 minutes, and he hands you a bill for $300. Well, it took him 20 years to get that good, and it took me 20 plus years to get to the point where I could make some tweaks in 5 minutes. But I do this for free for my club members because I do monthly critique certificates for them, which I do in batches. And I know you're a big fan of batching and efficiency and checklists and templates and things like that. So what I'm trying to do is really, take, again, my skills and turn them into tools for people, or do critiques for them in batches. Otherwise, it's really, I'm beyond the reach of most people in terms of cost to hire me.
Awesome. And I really like the idea of, if someone has, maybe they have like sort of a web page or sort of a landing page, and they say, I've kind of said what I want to say, but maybe it's not the sexiest way of saying it, or maybe, things are out of order or there are bottlenecks. And so I really like the idea of, if someone says, well, my choices are either maybe I could hire a copywriter like you and pay a big retainer and pay a percentage of the royalties, or maybe if I was doing it myself, and maybe either if I couldn't afford it, or if I just kind of had a pretty good stab at it, I could just make a web page and hand it off to someone like you to critique it, and then, like you said, like say what to change and show different headlines, and that way they don't kind of have to wait for this whole process. They don't have to give their whole website over to someone else. They can just kind of do it themselves, kind of, sort of.
Mm-hmm. And there's this principle at work there. I'm a member of something called Strategic Coach. It's run by a guy named Dan Sullivan. It's a fantastic program. Yeah. And one of his principles is if you can take it to your best 80% and hand it off to someone else, they could take it, the rest of the way much faster than you could by just struggling and beating your head against the wall. So this is that illustrated perfectly. If someone can come up with a coherent web page that does some selling. I can't multiply zeros, so if the product sucks or your web page copy or your sales piece is a disaster, I can't multiply zeros. But if it's doing anything well and you've taken it 80% of the way, I can come in 5, 10, 15 minutes and maybe take it to the 95, 99, 100% mark, just because this is what I do all day, every day. So there's a lot of value in the idea of handing things off to other people. This lets you multiply your results, multiply your effectiveness. If you can surround yourself with the right experts to just take things further for you, you can get a whole bunch more done and get much greater results in your business.
Awesome. So when you've been doing these sort of critiques, like, have you noticed any kind of like commonalities or like the low-hanging fruit where for like hundreds of critiques, like maybe there's like a set of like just basic principles that like people are like they all have in common when it's good, or they're all missing? Like, what sort of commonalities are you seeing?
A couple things just from some conversations I've had just today, frankly. One is most offers are missing a deadline, a credible deadline, that ends at 5 o'clock Friday, because that's when the next issue goes to press. That's a credible deadline. If you say it ends in 24 hours because, well, that's not credible, and your results are going to suffer as a result. So credible deadlines, anything to boost scarcity is going to increase, because people want what they can't have. They want, if you've got a bone and you dangle it in front of your dog, and then you pull it away, your dog's not going to be thrilled. He's going to bite at you, chase you, whatever. You're going to get a response, in other words, if you make something scarce. So scarcity is a big deal. Another thing that I see, this is kind of it flies under the radar for a lot of people. The price in your mind, the value in your mind is not necessarily going to reflect the value in the mind of the reader. By that I mean, you may think we tend to devalue our own stuff. I was just consulting with a client today. He wants to price something at $5.95, and I'm insisting it's worth at least $9.95. And he says, well, I'll have to add more stuff. I said, no, you don't, really. People don't want to pay more for complexity. They will pay more for greater results, however. So it's my job to just pump up the value here, and I can do that for you. But people need to resist the urge of just piling more stuff into an offer to make it seem more valuable. That's often just not going to be the case, because people have never been busier and more stressed out than they are now. And if you give people more stuff to process, that's not necessarily going to increase the value. So the main principle here is, what you think it's worth and what your prospects think it's worth is often totally different numbers. And it's probably going to shock you how much you're underpricing your stuff.
Yeah, and it sort of reminds me of that story you told a few minutes ago about the plumber who knows just the right spot to bang on, and it's like, well, the plumber charges $9.95, and it's like, well, you only spent 5 minutes or 5 seconds banging on that toilet, and you're like, well, it's $9.94 for the year's worth of training and $1 for knowing right where to
Exactly.
where to bang it. And so great. So have a credible deadline, and then don't devalue your own stuff, because piling on more stuff is sort of the opposite direction that things are going these days. And so have you noticed that, where like maybe if someone piles on too much stuff or says too much, then maybe like your sales letter like loses its effectiveness, or maybe it kind of goes off on too many tangents or is too wordy, people kind of miss the point?
Yeah, there's, you have to resist the urge to not tell your full sales story. So by no means am I saying, make your sales copy shorter. That's not what I'm saying. Long copy will sell to the interested person. If the story is about Robert Plank, if I put a headline at the top of a full page ad that says every word on this page is about Robert Plank, you're going to read every word. If my name is Joe Smith, I won't read it. Well, I'm not the prospect for that ad. So if you can have a headline that calls the right prospect into the ad, they will read every word, as long as you're not boring them to death. So it's a matter of telling your complete sales story, not dumping a boatload of value into people's laps that's not credible, that's not truly valuable. People will pay a good deal of money to make things simpler in their life. So it's your job to remove complexity, and it starts with your copy, the wording. It's got to be understandable to really a kid. 6th grade is an ideal reading level for most offers. And it's funny, now that I'm talking myself into another point here, I can think of 2 people I've consulted with in the last year who actively resisted writing simple copy. They were mildly outraged that I made their sales message so easy, because they were high-powered. One woman's got a PhD, and another guy's a high-powered, high-tech consultant. And they just endlessly complicated things. I would write something and they would send it back. They weren't clients for very long, by the way. I got rid of them, and that's another principle. But it's funny how some people will just resist making their message simple. To them, it's personally insulting. Well, you really can't, you can't be too clear. There's no penalty for clarity. And if you think so, if that concept offends you, you're going to struggle in your marketing.
And that makes perfect sense to me, because we can all be too close to something and maybe even like let a little bit of the ego get in the way and think, well, I have to appear smart and I have to have super fancy language and clever phrases and stuff like that. And I mean, this took me years to figure out, and I always have to still remind myself every now and then that I'm trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator. If someone lands on a web page, they're probably not going to know who Robert Plank is, or maybe if they do, maybe just barely. And there's only like a few seconds where I can capture their attention. So if there's just like tons of crazy fancy words I have to look up in the dictionary, I'm already gone, because I'm like, whoa, like I'm not supposed to be here.
Exactly. So there's no penalty for clarity. That's the bottom line.
And have you seen lately, like especially in maybe the past 5 years or so, with Facebook and cell phones and stuff like that, have you noticed that that web pages need to be even simpler, or less wordy, or more pictures or stuff like that, or just more of like a 6th grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, lower and lower reading level?
Well, so again, it's back to clarity. There are different tools online that'll tell you if your website is going to render clearly on a mobile phone, on a tablet, on a desktop. So the thing has to load and be easy to read. I made a client about $500,000 2 years ago by removing complexity from one of his web pages. It's an interesting story. He was advertising on national radio, and he was sending people to a landing page. And I was on retainer for him. I basically was optimizing all his marketing, making it streamlined, making it convert more. And I looked at the top of the sales letter. It was a good sales letter. He was an excellent copywriter. But there were 2 banner ads at the top. It was just totally competing for attention. I said, Bill, we're going to remove this banner ad. And he said, all right. And we tested it, and it ended up an annualized return of $500,000 more. It was $470,000 and change, I believe. But by not changing a word of the copy, I just made it load faster and easier to get through. So that's a dramatic example of how removing complexity can remove a barrier to the sale. There's a lot of neurological research that's being done about snap judgments. People will look at your website before they've read a word. They're judging it. How fast does it load? Does this design look appealing to me? Does this design look like something I trust, or does it look like it was made by an 11th grader in a cave in Pakistan, and this guy's going to steal my money and my data? So people are making hundreds of little calculations in the first half second before the first page for the first word of your website is visible to them. So it all hangs together. It's credibility, and really clarity can trump persuasion in many cases, I see, because a confused mind will say no. That's an old copywriting standby. And online, where you've got 101, everyone's got more than one tab open on their browser. I'm looking at mine. I think I've got 8. You're just a click away from losing anybody at any time. So if you're online, you can just never be too clear. And the way to get there, of course, is split testing. There's a whole bunch of nuts and bolts to this. But basically, if you want to do a focus group of your web page, just send some friends and neighbors, people who don't know exactly what you do professionally, and just give them a task. Go to my website and subscribe to my podcast. Go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. Just give them a task, and if you can, be in the room and watch them. I was learning all this, 20 years ago when I was webmaster for FedEx. So I'm a big believer in usability. And just watch. Give them a simple task and watch them on your website. And if you see them confused or clicking around, or if they're scratching their head, that's a danger sign, and you've got to make some changes. So you can, do your own usability testing on a Saturday afternoon. Get some beers and some pretzels. Don't let them drink until they're done. But, put some people, some friends in front of your website and give them a task. That's an easy way. There are other ways, of course. But, again, you can never be too clear. And clarity is often going to trump persuasion.
Awesome. I love it. And there's so many good lessons and reminders and stuff in there. And I mean, one that kind of struck me as you were telling some of those stories is that, it goes back to removing the ego and removing those pieces. And I've done some split testing like that also on a much smaller scale, but sort of some things like, having a giant logo and split testing without it, and then no logo or a super small logo converted better. And then even there was a period of time when everyone was teaching, well, if you have an opt-in page, a lead capture page, you should have a video and then have a form below it. And I, just for fun, split tested no video, and it converted way better. And sort of a blow to the ego that, all these things that I thought I was so clever and making headlines and making a video and removing as many things as possible helped, so much. And then even sort of along those lines, like you said, of just having some average person just go to your webpage and just figure out what it is they're supposed to do, and have that call to action and have it appeal to them. And even some of those simple things like at the bottom of a sales letter telling someone to click the button and buy, that was a thing I never would have thought of until I saw it on other web pages, or heard of it, or even a lead capture page where just having that form and saying, enter your name, enter your email address, click that button. It seems super silly, but then you add that in, and it helps so much just by, like you said, making it about them, making it easy and easy to understand for them, as opposed to just trying to, scratch your own back, feed your own ego.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in clarity. So one of my titles is Marketing Optimizer. And I had a woman I was consulting with last week. She's super smart, international consultant, several books. She talks to Google, and she's spoken at Apple, high flyer. And I was reviewing her e-zine that she wanted me to look at. And I said, what do you want me to do here? And she was silent for a few seconds. And she said, well, I want you to hire me. I said, it doesn't say that. Nowhere in this e-zine does it say I want you to call and request it. There's just no call to action. And so that's just very, 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 very typical of a lot of copy. There's no clear call to action. So you can improve your own copy, give it to someone, whether it's a sales letter or web page, and just ask them, what do you think I want you to do? And prepare to be shocked and amazed and probably, nauseated, because you're probably not as clear as you think you are. This goes for me. No one's perfect. But geez, just ask someone, what do you think I want you to do on this website? And prepare to be shocked. Or your e-zine, whatever you're sending out. That's a great little test question.
And I can totally relate to that. Just that, we're all super close to our own projects, and maybe because we spent 20 hours thinking of the perfect headline or 200 hours making that web page, we think, oh, well, just because I put in all this time on it, it must be valuable. But I mean, that none of that really matters. You can spend 200 years on it, but what matters is your goal is whether people buy or not. So I'm really curious sort of how you got here from where you started, from when you sold the first ebooks or you were the webmaster for FedEx. I mean, how did you get some of these high-ticket clients and build up your membership site and stuff like that?
So it's taken me 20 years to become an overnight success, to coin a cliche. The constant through all my work has been persuasion, getting people to do things. It's just magic in my mind. It's like alchemy, and it's endlessly fascinating. So I'm doing what I love every day. It's not really work for me. It's like someone who plays piano 10 hours a day or guitar, whatever. This is just endlessly fascinating for me. So I've gotten better just because I've never given up. I put in tens of thousands of hours in 20 plus years. I have no idea how many hours of writing and practice. But you have to start with what you know. So back when I was first looking for clients, I canvassed my neighbors and friends with a business and did things for low. Don't be afraid to charge a low price. Do not give your stuff away. I hear from all these people, they're not paying me, but I'm going to get a lot of exposure. That's bullshit, to be very frank. Never do anything for exposure. So don't charge as much as you can at the beginning, but really you need to get testimonials, which beget more testimonials, which beget higher prices. It's a virtuous circle as long as you're doing the right things. The way I grew my business was simply I stay in touch with people with a printed newsletter, for example. I go to a lot of conferences every year. I send out a daily email, probably 4 or 5 days a week. So it's like a bicycle. You got to keep pedaling or you're just going to fall over. So for 20 years, I've been doing something almost every day to grow my business. And if you never give up, you will succeed. The people who quit are the ones who fail. It sounds trite, but I see it all the time. People are pretty close to success and they get bored and try something else. And if you never quit, you will succeed. It's as simple as that. And I've just never quit.
Awesome, and I can totally relate to that. And I've seen a lot of people where they'll go on one path for like 6 months and then quit. And I'm like, oh, if only you stay with that for like 8 months, 9 months, and they go off for something else for 6 months. And then years and years later, they've put in all the time, if not more work than the rest of us. But just because they kept on switching gears, starting over, it's like they were just kind of spinning their wheels and doing all this stuff needlessly. So printed newsletter, attending conferences, a daily email, and like, if you were to start all over again, or you had a time machine or something, is there a shortcut, or is there anything that you would do differently, or like more of something, or what advice do you have for someone who's maybe starting over, or who hasn't had 20 years or doesn't want to wait 20 years?
Good questions. I'll do some rapid fire answers here. First would be to get more support sooner. I've been in a mastermind group of one sort or another since 1997, but I could have used another group such as Strategic Coach. I also went through Brian Tracy's Focal Point Coaching. I also went through Peak Performers with GKIC. Getting in a room at least quarterly with other entrepreneurs who think like you and can buck you up and help you get over the rough spots, that's crucial. I think that's an undervalued idea, is that entrepreneurs need support, because if you're banging away for a month or two and not seeing revenue come in, it's easy to give up if you're trying to do it by yourself. Your family won't understand. Your spouse probably won't understand. Most people who are not entrepreneurs have no idea what we do every day. It's a very, very, very lonely road we're on, so you need support. So I think one of my first bits of advice would be to get support from a coach or group coaching, but just get something that works for you, people who are going to hold you accountable. Second would be to use direct mail earlier. I really didn't come to direct mail until about 10 years ago. I was trying to do everything online, and that's just, this was back in the 90s and early 2000s. But if you're trying to do everything online, you're just cutting yourself off at the knees. You really have to get tangible as soon as you can, and I wish I had gotten tangible earlier. I still did it pretty quickly, relatively speaking, but email only is just not going to cut it. You've got to find a way to stay in touch, at least with your high-value clients, by direct mail or meeting them in person, something tangible. That's critical, especially if you're selling a service. Those are the two things that come to mind real quick. We could go on and on about that, but it's really, entrepreneurship, running your own business, it can be very lonely, so your support system is critical.
Awesome, and I can really attest to that mastermind thing, and even like some of those meetings where you have a bunch of people in person in a room, and even if like someone else is asking for advice for their business and they get that advice, like sometimes I'll get little aha moments, even though they're in a completely different niche, selling a completely
Mm-hmm.
different thing. I'm like, ooh, I can use that thing they told to do with the web pages on mine. Like even you just mentioned like an offline newsletter. I mean, anyone can sort of use that, and I'm really curious about that because I think I had Jim Palmer on the show a few months ago, and I keep hearing
Yeah.
from different people about this whole newsletter thing. And so what kind of newsletter are we talking about? Like how often, how many pages, and then who do we send that to specifically?
Very good question. So Jim's an expert on newsletters. I like and respect his work. There's another guy by the name of Sean Buck who's very good at it. I do things a bit differently. My newsletter is actually, it's a two-word title, newsletter. It's actually a letter full of news. It's not your typical self-mailer. It's not a 4-page full-color thing. It's 2 sides of one sheet of paper with my most popular blog article from the last 2 weeks typically. And so what I do is I repurpose copy 9 ways to Sunday, and I blog pretty frequently. Whatever's getting read and reacted to, I print that and put it in my newsletter, which I send out to people. And then at the end, I just remind people, here's what I'm doing. I'm probably booked for the next I typically have how far in advance I'm booked. I tell people I'm busy because I'm good, but I'm never too busy to talk to you or anyone you send my way. And here's, by the way, for people who can't afford me, or if I'm too busy, you should visit marketingmultipliers.com. So I always have a call to action at the end of my newsletters. And by staying top of mind with people, I get hired by past. So it goes to past clients. It goes to prospective clients. And then it goes to a third segment, referral partners. These are people who are upstream of me, who talk to my clients before I do. So printers, for example, if you're talking to a business owner, any business owner who's printing stuff, they may be doing their own direct mail, for example, and those printers will tell them, you should talk to Kevin. I also talk to other people upstream of me are web designers who are designing a website for a client. They may need someone to write the copy to go on the web pages. So referral partners, it's a huge, very valuable concept. Anyone who talks to your client before you do, that's a potential referral partner for you. The classic example is that if I'm an orthodontist, my ideal referral partner is a dentist who sees children. Because when the kid gets to be about 10 and he's got dog teeth, the dentist is going to say, you should talk to Dr. Donlin, the orthodontist down the hall, because he's great. So if you've got just a couple of referral partners upstream of you, another great one for me is a direct mail consultant, for example. I have one referral partner. He's a direct mail guy. Geez, he sent me close to $200,000 in business over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I track all this stuff, so I know it to the penny. And it's fascinating what people will send you over their buying lifetime if you just keep in touch with them regularly.
Awesome, and I really like so much about that, and I like that it's just 2 sides of the same piece of paper. So I mean, why make it complicated, right? We're talking about simplicity here, and I mean, who's even going to read like a big, thick 20-page thing, especially this day and age? So awesome, and I also like how you're not just scrambling for content; you're using old blog posts, and even in addition to that, you're kind of using the blog post almost as like testing different material, and then
Right.
you said like based on stuff that's reacted to the most, then that's what you send out to the masses. And so as far as these like referral partners go, I mean, how did you get those? Is that just accumulated through 20 years of like going to conferences, or have you like reached out to some of them specifically, or how do you collect those people?
Yeah, good question. It's a little of both. Mostly it's people I meet, and I know who I'm looking for. That's key. If your antenna are up and you know who you're looking for, you'll see them. If you don't know who your referral partner is, you'll walk right by them. So I know I'm looking for direct mail consultants, printers, web designers, even other marketing consultants who may not do what I do. And when I'm at a conference, I'm going to one next week, for example. I try to go to one every quarter. And I know who I'm looking for. I research who the speakers are. I try to meet the speakers. That's who one of my best referral partners is. Actually, he was speaking at a conference, and I made a point of meeting him. So if you're just a little bit proactive before you go to your next conference and you know what you're looking for, guess what? You can find them. And referral partners are the difference between a referral and a referral partner. This is from my friend Jim Bear. It's the difference between, going for glasses of water and digging a well. So I like to dig wells, and with a few referral partners in place, you can have wells, and your leads will not dry up.
Awesome stuff, and that's good advice in general, because by sort of first of all going to whatever kind of event you're going to and knowing what you want to get out of it. I mean, I'm sure that you've met people at some events where like they just kind of go from event to event, and I think I met one person, and I think he had gone to like 13 straight events in a row and hadn't been home in like 2 months, and I was like, well, geez, you must be like just full of like contacts and information, and this person just was kind of a mess. He didn't really know what he was doing. So I mean, sounds simple, but just really commonly overlooked advice of just kind of knowing what you want to get out of it. And I like how you're kind of getting yourself out there and talking to people that you normally wouldn't talk to, because like I've kind of come across this myself where, when someone asks me what I do, I usually tell them membership sites, and they say, oh, well, I don't do membership sites. And it's just, I'm thinking like, well, who cares? Like you're a new person that I wouldn't have connected with otherwise. Like I might be able to send you people, you might be able to send me people, but some people I've just seen kind of just tune out if you aren't the same exact thing that they are. And it's like, well, if you're the same exact thing as I am, then you're a competitor. I'd rather have that sort of complementary relationship there. And so one thing I kind of want to know about is, and we're sort of starting to run out of time, but we're talking about copywriting and newsletters and all these different forms and stuff. Do you have like a writing process, or do you have a way of kind of getting yourself energized or overcoming writer's block when it hits you, stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. The cure for writer's block is research. If you run into writer's block, it's because you didn't do your research. So early in a project, I'm going to be looking at 10, 15, 20 years of other people's sales letters. I have access to databases, for example. So I'm getting ideas that others have used. I have to make mine different, of course. I'm looking at competitors. I'm going to interview my client for about 45 minutes, just like this. I transcribe it, so I've got a written 10, 20-page transcript. Research. When you've got the research done, then you just pour through it. And then the ideas will start to bubble up. You can't do this overnight, so good writing takes time. At least for me, it does. And I find that my time is my best editor, so I'll try to bang out a first draft. I use something. There's one of my secrets I'm happy to give away. It's called the Pomodoro technique. It's basically Google Pomodoro, which is Italian for tomato. It has to do with a kitchen timer that looks like a tomato. You work in 30-minute bursts, then you take 5 minutes off, or some variation close to that. And at the start of a work day, if I block off 4 hours for a project, that's 8 half-hour segments. And so I tell myself in the next 8 30-minute segments, I'm going to do the intro, I'm going to do page 1 and 2, I'm going to do the order form. I just block it out, and then I set a timer. And I write, and I don't care if it's good or bad or ugly. I just write, and at the end of 4 hours, I've completed everything I needed to. And then I come back the next day, and I work and refine it. It typically takes 3-4 days, depending on the complexity. I just did a project for a tax consultant last week, which was pretty complicated. It took me 3 days of tough writing, but the Pomodoro technique is almost magical. It just forces you through the process, and there's no writer's block. You're just going along. If you get stuck, you skip it and come back. That's another thing. People will spend way too much time agonizing over the the first sentence or the introductory paragraph. Just do that last. If you get everything else, you can bolt something on, and it'll kind of write itself at some point. So again, we could talk for 6 hours on this alone, but really the cure for writer's block is research, and then the Pomodoro technique is an almost magical way to get stuff done. And then thirdly, I suppose my other trick is time is my best editor, meaning if I write something today and it's pretty good and I'll look at it tomorrow, it's crap, but I can instantly fix it because I'm coming at it with a fresh set of eyes 24 hours later. And you do that for a couple days, and the thing gets better with a lot less effort.
Cool, and there's so many good things to unpack in there, and we don't have time to unpack it all, but I mean, I can relate to so much of that, especially like writing the copy out of order, because I've definitely had times when I was just stuck on the headline and the headline just wasn't working, and I just said, okay, well, I'll leave that alone and jump to like the offer stack or the features, and then after my mind kind of goes through that, I'm like, okay, well, that tells me like I'll back up a little bit and write some bullet points, and then usually it's like by the time I'm done, like the headline headline is somehow magically there. It's sort of like that kind of thing of like, if you're writing a book, or even if you're writing like a term paper for school and you don't know what to title the dang thing, we'll just skip that and write the whole thing, and then the title that you think of after writing it is way better than if you were just kind of grasping at straws. And all those things you talked about, like even the way that you broke down the copy, it was almost in sort of milestones. Like you didn't say, oh, well, I'm 5% done, I'm 10% done. You're like, well, I get to, the rough draft, and I go and like do that pass. And then, and it also seems like, with like the timer and getting used to writing, I imagine that it gets easier the more often you do it. Like, I imagine if like, someone hasn't written a sales letter, or maybe if, school was 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's hard to kind of get in that writing flow. And I imagine that when you just get used to like working in those kinds of sprints and, writing stuff and taking a break and coming back to it, I imagine that it becomes easier and easier to kind of just like snap back into that sort of excited flow state.
It's totally like that. I mean, my default headline at the start of every project, pardon my French, I write big fucking headline, and that's the top of the page, and I come back and fill it in later. I obviously don't ever print an ad that says big fucking headline, but I'll generate 20, 30 headlines on day one, and then come back and pick one, on day 3, let's say. But what's cool about the Pomodoro technique, if I have 8 little 30-minute check boxes, and I do each one and check it off, you get an endorphin rush every time you check something off. And it's like orienteering as a Boy Scout. If you try to get 20 miles through the wilderness and you just walk in a direction for 20 miles, you'll just be hopelessly lost, invariably, especially if you're going through a valley. But if you go, okay, I'm headed towards that mountaintop 20 miles away, there is a pine tree. I can see it. It's a mile in front of me. It's in the same line of sight. I'll go to the pine tree and then, reorient myself again. Same principle. If you get these little milestones, one after the other, you're just focused on what's in front of you. You're not overwhelmed by the size of the task, and you just get it done a lot better, a lot faster and more efficiently. And it's a rush to check things off. At the end of 4 hours, I've done 8 little segments. That's cool. So I've had a good morning.
Yeah, and I also imagine that if you had tried to sit down for 4 hours straight, you'd just be, in every possible way, like looking forward to 4 hours, or be saying, I'm 2 hours in, only 2 hours to go, or even once the 4 hours are done, you're like, oh, I didn't eat, I didn't go to the bathroom, I didn't
Right,
walk
you get
or
into
run.
flow that way. It's just like running. If I'm really exhausted, I'll just look at my feet and just one step in front of the other, and all of a sudden you've gone 3 miles. And if you thought about the 3 miles or 5 miles, whatever, at the start, you probably wouldn't have got out of bed. But it's really keeping yourself in flow. If you're not worried about the time element, you're just working in the process. It's almost magical.
Awesome. And I imagine also, likewise, if someone had told you 20, 23 years ago that you would have had to, write however many newsletters that is, however many emails 365 times 23 is, you would have been like, I might as well just quit now. But you're thinking in terms of, waypoints or milestones, and it makes it a lot easier to sort of eat that elephant, one bite at a time, or maybe like one appendage at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. And we went over time, but we had a good conversation, and I definitely I would definitely want to have you back and stuff like that. But before we let you go, before we talk about like your websites and stuff like that, have you seen, just in all your like decades of looking at copy, writing copy, critiquing copy, have you seen like a number one copywriting mistake happen over and over again?
Oh, one. If I had to boil it, there's really no one easy button that you can push to improve your copy. I think probably if I were to pick one, it would be you probably used your first choice of a headline. Headlines just can almost always be improved, unless you do this for a living. But if you don't get their attention with the headline or the first sentence of your video, you've lost them. And so really probably the number one thing is people don't put enough attention into headlines. And a corollary of that is they try to reuse somebody else's headline. And what worked in the 30s, it may work now, but it probably won't. However, the principles that worked in the 30s will definitely work now. You just have to tap into the current zeitgeist, what's going on, what are people thinking about now. So, people are thinking about politics, they're thinking about economics. So what's in the air now? Try to have that reflected in your headlines and write at least 25 iterations, versions, and guess what? Your best headline is probably going to be number 22 or 23. The first 10, 15, 20 headlines that you come up with are going to be at the top of your brain, top of mind, and they may be good, but you have to dig deeper in many cases. And the process kind of feeds on itself. After you get to 20, it may seem agonizing, but you break through a wall, and you'll start coming up with some new versions and some new, and I'll often go 35, 40, 50 headlines just to exhaust all possibilities. But I guess if I had one bit of advice, it would be put much more thought in your headline, and don't try to cheat by using somebody else's headline, because it probably won't work for you unless you really know what you're doing.
Makes perfect sense to me in a lot of ways. That, like, if the headline sucks, what does it matter if the rest of the sales letter is awesome if people won't read it? I mean, that's of course the most important thing. And then also in those terms of writing that headline or coming up with a bunch of things, like I've definitely gone through that where, like, I wrote a headline and I was like, oh, I guess it's sort of okay, and then I get to like maybe 5 or 10 headlines and I'm like, well, it's decent, and then maybe headlines 11, 15, 20, 25 kind of suck. It's like getting worse and worse in quality because I feel like I'm sort of grasping at straws and running out of ideas. But then I've definitely experienced that where after like writing worse and worse headlines, I break through and I'm like, whoa, like now I'm kind of making some connections, like this idea from this headline plus what this other headline was trying to accomplish end up with something way better. And I've also seen that whole thing of, like, if I've had a headline and I'll have like a friend like steal my headline and then change one word or change 2 words and it doesn't even really make sense, and I'm thinking, oh, you should have looked at like what the headline was trying to accomplish. Like if it kind of asked a loaded question or like challenged them to something, then what the headline was going to accomplish, that becomes more of like a timeless kind of thing and appealing to human emotion, as opposed to just taking some, like you said, some language from the 30s and trying to awkwardly make it your own in the current 2017.
Exactly. When it comes to generating headlines, that's a very close cousin of, brainstorming. So if you're trying to solve a problem, the way to get good ideas is to have many ideas. And most of your ideas will be bad ideas, but if you have a lot of ideas, at least a few of them will be good ideas. So whether it's headlines or brainstorming solutions, just write and don't edit yourself. And I often find, like, number 17, what was that? That was crappy. 18, what was that? That's what? And then 19, wow, where did that come from? And you had to go through the crappy ones to get to the surprising, really good ones. It's almost invariable. So don't edit yourself. Just keep going, and you'll just be surprised. Where did that come from? I can't tell you how many times I have that reaction. Hey, that's a good headline. That's a good idea. But it's because you had to go through all the bad ones to get to the good one.
Awesome, and I think that even applies just in our own businesses as well, where, like, just like you have to get through the bad headlines to get to the good ones. I mean, you have to get through the bad ideas or the bad projects or the bad websites to kind of get to that thing. I mean, there's always, like, whenever you study any of these super successful entrepreneurs, like Elon Musk, I think had 5 or 6 failing companies, and then finally he created PayPal. So I mean, really good advice in general, and it sounds like you're kind of the testament to, just take some action. It doesn't even matter if, your first couple of actions are bad, or if we're on the wrong track or didn't appeal. I mean, you just keep on having those ups and downs. You keep on course correcting, and eventually, if you stick with those daily actions and don't give up, and you actually, are honest about if things are going good or bad, I mean, that's then you'll eventually kind of find your own path. So it's really, really good stuff, and I want to make sure that everyone knows everything there is to know about Mr. Kevin Donlin. So if people listen to our conversation today and they say, man, I want to go to this guy's website, maybe I want to hire, maybe I want to join this Marketing Multipliers course, all that stuff, where should people go after listening to our talk today?
Well, if you're running a business now, you're not in startup mode, you're not part-time. If you've got a going concern, Marketing Multipliers is probably a good bet for you. It's a monthly subscription service. First box you can try for $1 if you like it. You just you can stay with it. It's $29.95 a month, which is like a large pizza and a 2-liter bottle of Coke. But every month it's like Dollar Shave Club for entrepreneurs is how I describe it. Instead of razor blades in a box, you get bigger paychecks because I send a tool every month to replace a skill. The first box comes with 11 tools, and after that it's 1 tool a month, plus critique certificates. So I can do those reviews that we talked about earlier, where I can come in 5 minutes and give you 3, 4, 5 headlines and improve your copy. So that's available at www.marketing marketingmultipliers.com. And if people give that a try, it's just $1 for the first box if you're in the continental U.S. Mention that you heard this on Robert Plank's podcast. I will also send you a free autographed copy of my new book, which is called, oddly enough, Marketing Multipliers. There are different tools in that book than you'll get in the box, so you're really going to get close to 20 tools, I think, when it's all said and done. And I'm happy to do that for listeners of your podcast. I'll ship them a signed copy at no extra charge separately, but it'll come if you just say that you heard me on Robert Plank's podcast. So that's www.marketingmultipliers.com.
Awesome. Great stuff. So everyone go right now. If you're driving and you're listening to this, pull the car over and scroll down that address, or make sure to, call or text the wife and let her know when you get home that you have to go to marketingmultipliers.com right now. $1 trial, $29.95 a month. Mention that you came from Robert Plank's podcast to get that autographed book. So thanks so much, Kevin, for stopping by the show and dispensing life advice, business advice, copywriting advice, all kinds of stuff in between. I had fun. I hope you did too.
I did, Robert. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Check out the latest episodes of our podcast on the web at robertplank.com and subscribe to us on iTunes at robertplank.com/iTunes.